If your life looks perfect from the outside, please don't scroll away, because I used to believe perfection was the same thing as happiness, and it took me almost 4 decades to understand how wrong I was. I was 38 years old, a mother of 2 beautiful children, married to a man everyone described as responsible, stable, and kind. We had a comfortable house, family dinners every Sunday, birthday parties with balloons and candles, smiling photographs framed neatly on the living room wall. From a distance, my life looked like something people wished for. Friends would squeeze my hand and say, "You're so lucky." Relatives would whisper that I had everything a woman could want. And every time I heard those words, I would smile politely while something inside me quietly sank a little deeper. The truth is, there was no big tragedy in my marriage, no dramatic betrayal, no explosive fights that shattered plates against the wall. What we had was far more invisible and, in some ways, far more painful. We had silence. We had routine. We had 2 people functioning like business partners managing a household instead of 2 souls truly connected. Our conversations slowly turned into checklists. Did you pay the electricity bill? What time is the parent-teacher meeting? Can you pick up groceries on your way home? We stopped asking each other about dreams. We stopped talking about fears. We stopped noticing the subtle changes in each other's eyes. Somewhere between raising children and meeting responsibilities, we lost the softness that once brought us together. At night, when the house finally grew quiet and the children were asleep, I would sit alone in the kitchen with only one small light on. I would make tea I didn't even want, just to have something warm to hold. Sometimes I would open the fridge and stare at the shelves without knowing what I was looking for. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I was empty. There was a strange heaviness in my chest, like I was carrying a weight that had no name. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself every mother feels overwhelmed. I told myself to be grateful. Gratitude became the mask I wore to hide confusion. The anxiety crept in slowly. My heart would start racing for no clear reason. My hands would feel cold. I would lie in bed next to my husband and feel completely alone, staring at the ceiling while questions circled in my mind. Is this it? Is this how life is supposed to feel? Why do I feel like a guest in my own story? During the day, I performed perfectly. I packed lunches, helped with homework, remembered birthdays, hosted dinners. I became efficient, reliable, strong. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing. I had become a role instead of a person. A mother, a wife, a daughter. Everything to everyone except myself. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, my daughter looked at me carefully and said, "Mama, you don't laugh like before." Children notice what adults try to hide. Her words weren't loud, but they echoed in my heart for days. That night, I cried quietly so no one would hear. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed without forcing it. I couldn't remember the last time I did something simply because it made me feel alive. Eventually, I gathered the courage to seek therapy. I walked into that room feeling embarrassed, almost guilty, as if I were betraying the perfect life everyone believed I had. I expected the therapist to tell me I was overthinking or being dramatic. Instead, she asked me one simple question: "What do you want?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no idea. I had spent so many years adjusting, compromising, accommodating, that I had stopped listening to my own voice. I began to cry, not because my life was terrible, but because I had abandoned myself without even noticing. In those sessions, I slowly uncovered pieces of who I used to be. I once loved writing. I dreamed of building something of my own. I wanted to travel, to learn, to create. Each dream had been postponed for the right time. First because we were newly married, then because the children were small, then because finances needed stability. There was always a reason to wait. And while I waited, my spirit quietly shrank. I realized that I had confused sacrifice with self-erasure. I believed that being a good wife and mother meant putting myself last always. But the more I denied my own needs, the more resentful and restless I became. Talking to my husband was the hardest conversation of my life. There was no shouting, no accusations, just two tired people sitting across from each other, finally admitting what we had both felt but never said. We had grown into different versions of ourselves. We cared about each other, but we were no longer connected in the way that makes a marriage feel alive. Sometimes love changes shape, and sometimes it becomes a quiet friendship instead of a partnership. Accepting that truth hurt deeply. We cried. We questioned everything. We wondered if we were making a mistake. But beneath the fear, there was honesty. Choosing to leave was not dramatic. It was slow, painful, and filled with doubt. I worried about my children. I worried about judgment. I worried about money, stability, and whether I would regret it forever. Some people called me selfish. Others said I should have adjusted more. A few quietly supported me. But in the middle of all the noise, I noticed something new. I could breathe. The tightness in my chest slowly began to loosen. The panic attacks became less frequent. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making a decision not out of obligation, but out of truth. The months that followed were messy. I moved into a smaller place. I created new routines for the children. I learned how to manage finances more independently. There were nights when loneliness felt overwhelming and guilt tried to convince me to go back simply because it was familiar. Healing is not glamorous. It's quiet, repetitive, and sometimes painfully slow. But with every small step, I felt stronger. I started writing again. I took online courses. I rediscovered the simple joy of walking alone in the evening without explaining where I was going. I began to recognize my own reflection. Asterisk if you are listening to my story and seeing fragments of your own life in it, please know this: feeling unhappy does not make you ungrateful. Wanting more connection does not make you selfish. Choosing your mental health does not mean you have failed. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something gently. If voices like mine help you feel less alone, if real and honest conversations matter to you, please subscribe and stay connected. Because sometimes we just need reminders that our silent struggles are shared by others. Asterisk today, my life is not perfect. It is not polished for social media. There are challenges, compromises, and moments of uncertainty. But there is also authenticity. I laugh more freely. I talk to my children with presence instead of exhaustion. I make decisions with awareness instead of fear. I no longer feel like a guest watching my own existence from the sidelines. Walking away from something that looks perfect can be terrifying, but sometimes it is the bravest step towards something that feels real. And if I have learned anything from this journey, it is this: you deserve to be the main character in your own life, not a background figure maintaining an image for everyone else.